Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, your home for all things Chelsea FC. Nick, Dan, and myself cover all the match reviews from the latest Chelsea matches. We cover the team news and even throw you some exclusive interviews. Thank you already for being an awesome listener, and you know what? Let's jump right in.
Welcome back, Chelsea fans, for a little additional action this week. You know what? Chelsea only required to play the 90, but we'll go above and beyond for that. Brandon out still. We hope he feels better soon. That's right, Dan's here behind the hot mic. It's a hot mic, Nick. You're back, though. You're joining us. It's wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Is that a question?
No, it is a thanks. It was rambling to a statement.
Please tell me you're back. Please tell me there's someone on the other side of this line.
Oh, I mean, Brandon is kind of like, Azpilicueta last season, or, it's, you expect him to be there. When he's not, it breaks your soul. You wonder what else is a lie, is a Frosty really ice cream? Like, I don't even know. I have no idea.
All right. Enough of that shenanigans with Wendy's. My God.
All right. But we also have Mike back as well. And Mike, thank you for being here. We appreciate that as well.
Well, thanks for calling me hot earlier, so I appreciate that. And unfortunately, much like Eden Hazard, Brandon did not show up today either.
Oh.
Wow.
Man.
Going right for the jugular. That is nasty.
My God. Straight
hot
up.
Takes.
All
this
right.
is the hot takes version of our show.
Okay. Well, this is what happens when Brandon isn't here to keep the children, myself included, in line. But anyway, we will be going through your social media questions, and we will also take a look ahead just briefly to what's happening a little later in the week. A double dose of Liverpool action, which is not that awesome. But Nick, before we do that, we don't want to delay in mentioning the fact that we are going back to London for a Blues Christmas.
Correct. We are really excited to be going back, guys. You guys know that we've been 3 times so far as a show together. Dan's been an extra time, and Mike went before he joined, and then went on our trip last December. So lots of experience going on this trip. We know the ins and outs. We're really excited to partner with XL Tours again to put all this trip stuff together for us, because they're really great at managing all of the logistics, so that you're not looking at Nick and Dan's travel agency to do all of that. So what is included in this trip? You're looking at hotel for every night that we're there, which is the 28th through the 2nd. You're looking at match tickets, which are obviously a huge part of going to see a match, but tickets are actually pretty hard to come by over there. And XL Tours does a great job of hooking us up with some pretty great seats. So we'll be seeing Palace away, which is going to be a really interesting match to go to. And as Gary Hayes says, kind of a throwback stadium atmosphere. They obviously have a great fan base that are really loud. And then on the 1st of January, on New Year's Day 2019, we'll be seeing Chelsea beat up on poor old Southampton at home at the Bridge. And if you haven't been before, it is a magical time, Mike, to go to your first match at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, I mean, last December was amazing, and being able to see both a Premier League match and I was lucky enough to see Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. It's life changing. I've been there once before, but the trip was, I hate to say trip of a lifetime, but it was just absolutely fantastic. I highly encourage anybody who's interested to at least look into it, because until you've been there on game day, you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah, and so if you have any questions, DM us, email us. There is a payment plan option if you're looking at the price and thinking that it's going to be too much for a lump sum. We totally get that, and we want to be respectful of your wallet. So please let us know if you need anything, extra accommodation, extra nights, tickets to the ballet, whatever you might be into. DM us or email us or contact at londonisbluepodcast.com, and we will handle it. Back to you, Dan.
All right, we've got a ton of your social media questions here. We did, on the first episode of the week, talk a lot about N'Golo Kanté. We talked about the midfield with Jorginho and Kovacic. We touched a little bit on Eden Hazard. So those have been encapsulated in episode 1 of the week, but we will try to touch on those comments and questions that didn't necessarily get all the exposure heading into episode 2 here. First one from Instagram, Uche0902 asking Nick, when will we see Odoi? You know, if he can't get on the bench for Europa League, will there ever be a good time? Sometimes you have to throw the kids into the fire. Probably not good and sound advice from a parenting perspective. I'm sure Mike could attest to. But
Jesus,
when do we think HudsonOdoi will return into the fold for first team action?
I think you will see him on Wednesday against Liverpool, flat out. And yeah, I was, to be honest with you, I was really disappointed with Sarri's lineup against PAOK in Greece on Thursday of last week. I thought it was, there was probably not enough rotation, and if you watch the team play against West Ham, that became even more glaringly obvious. So I really hope we see him start on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup against Liverpool at Anfield. I think that's about as much of throwing him into the fire as you would need for one game, Mike, and hopefully he does a really great job in that moment.
For sure. I have to feel, I would love to be able to see how Odoi practices, because I feel very much for Sarri that he wants to be able to trust players. We've seen it with his comments on RLC, and I just hope that, between Odoi and Ampadu, that these young guys can really just work their socks off and get a great chance to play it. I mean, who wouldn't want to play away at Anfield, regardless of the competition?
So another one that came through, Mike, and, we talked a little bit about the midfield, but we didn't talk a ton about former Arsenal captain Cesc Fabregas, who is still a Chelsea player, who has returned from injury. DevGum9 asking, would Fabregas do well in the system, and should we be looking to send him on in the last 20 to 25 minutes? I think they're thinking about the Antonio Conte era where Cesc was being used as that super sub. Does that have a spot or a place in what we're doing currently?
Not in my squad. and no. I mean, look, yeah, that I've been hard on Cesc in the past, but I don't. This isn't even being brutal on him. I don't see where he slots in unless he's coming in at the center and replacing Jorginho. I don't see what he adds or where he can slot in, because if anything, I still think that he's a defensive liability. And, maybe he mixes it up. Maybe he could do something special. But I think that the answer to our offensive woes is speeding up the ball and one-touch passing. And until we speed things up and just hurry up faster, I think teams are going to be able to get set defensively. And I don't think there's necessarily any player who's just going to have the magic key or hat to unlock that.
I'm actually on the opposite side of this, and I really think that as a super sub, Dan, that Cesc might do a job for this team. We talked a lot in the first episode of the week about the midfield three and where the goals are going to come from, and should Chelsea be facing a back 50 like we have against our previous opponents, who brings a different skill set into the midfield as a sub. And I think Cesc, if he replaces someone like Kovacic, would definitely bring in some final third passing ability and perhaps even contribute a couple of goals. So I'm not writing him off. I think that he does have a role in this team. It's just going to be situational based on the type of opponent we're playing. I
think here's the question, though, Mike, in return. So, George, I think you would look at Cesc being the replacement, in your mind, maybe then Nick, for Jorginho, right? Because in terms of, we're talking about distribution, we're talking about moving the ball around. So, if it's not Fabregas coming on in place of Jorginho, who out of our midfield reinforcement comes on or comes into the lineup if he's injured to try to move the ball around and distribute?
I think if you're going to replace Jorginho, maybe that would be the Fabregas role, but maybe it would be an Ampadu, or maybe it would be Ruben Loftus-Cheek. My biggest fear with Cesc is which defense is he unlocking, our own or the opponent's? And until he kind of gets his plus minus higher, in my opinion, I still think he makes us very, very vulnerable to counterattacks, just because I don't believe he has the legs to play in the Premier League anymore. But that's my take, Nick. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he could nick in a few goals, but that's where I'm standing.
I don't think that N'Golo Kanté would be a horrible option to replace Jorginho, and I know that sounds ridiculous because they are way different players. But if Jorginho's out of the game, what most people have to realize is that the team will want to play the same, but they just won't. We don't have a direct replacement for him, and I think the team will have to adapt a significant amount. But once the ball gets through the midfield to a Kovacic or to a Barkley or someone else, then the passing should then pick up steam again, and it should be quick and it should be dynamic. And Pedro and Willian and Hazard should be making runs in behind, and Morata should be making the right type of crashing run to get into the box and put it in. So not all is going to be lost on this, Dan, but I think there are plenty of options to replace Jorginho. I would have Cesc come in for a Kovacic or an N'Golo Kanté to start. Not as a starter, but to just to get his feet wet into the system, around the 60th minute or so, and then let's see how they do in training. But I'm pretty sure that Cesc will still have a role to play this year.
Well, Nick, as you mentioned, Morata, Jacksonville Blues asks us the question: who is the better Chelsea striker? A, Morata, or B, the guy who cleans the locker rooms?
Well, I mean, Jacksonville Blues is not insinuating that Olivier Giroud, World Cup winner, is the guy who cleans the locker rooms, right? So this must be one of those leading questions, guys, that I'm prepared to answer. I get, and I think we all get after the first 7 matches of the season that Morata's left a lot to be desired. He has 1 goal. He has a bunch of almost goals, as Mike Ryan brought up in the first episode of the week. He's not looked dynamic enough. He's not looked cutting edge enough. He's not looked clinical enough. And eventually we're gonna have to just hold him to the standard that we would hold anybody else to. I don't think he's been nearly as bad as people want to make it out to be, and I think there's still just some Torres syndrome happening, where people can't get around a Spanish striker who's going through a bit of a rough patch. But overall, Mike, it's not been great. Let me put it that way.
No, it's been tough to watch, and I think we really could have used him to convert that goal today. It would have made a huge difference. When it comes to the end of the season, where we end up, and we really want him to have that clinical killer edge to him. Close isn't good enough. We're not playing horseshoes, but I do believe that people are being too hard on him, especially with how compact defenses are playing. If we were in an out and out open game and he was just not performing, I would be more concerned. I really would have loved to see him get a goal today. I think that would have really just, what a difference that would have made, just for his confidence, for the club, to extend to that 6 win. But coulda, shoulda, woulda. Dan?
Yeah, well, Morata was a sub, so he didn't get a traditional numerical ranking from me. In our new segment of What Else Can Dan Mess Up? Player rankings through Twitter and Instagram. But I think you're right that ultimately it's and Mike Ryan made the same point on our first episode this week, but it was that Morata is the king of almost scored goals. And when we did a little word association game on Twitter after the Europa League match, there were more mentions to Torres than I was hoping to see. And I think that just tells you a little bit about the feeling of the fan base right now. And there's definitely, people want him to be successful. Like, I think there's a distinction to be drawn in that people are not actively rooting for Morata to not do well. And I think there are fan bases out there that would, have an agenda and try to drive it and hope that certain players start or, get sold and sign. I don't think that's what's happening here. What's happening is people are frustrated in a high priced acquisition of a player, a person who has not necessarily proven himself to provide the value or kind of been the finished article that we thought we were getting. And it's going to be an area that's going to be reviewed and I think potentially look to be upgraded, especially again, like if we are in multiple competitions, this week will be telling, considering that we have to play Liverpool twice, once in the League Cup and then once also in the Premier League. If we can stay in 4 competitions and be competing for all of them, like that's when you potentially see a large, maybe acquisition of a striker or an attacking winger who's going to add some more goal threat up front. But I definitely think Morata could be a casualty and need to be sold. And yeah, it's not great. Not a great spot for our boy Alvaro, number 29. So
let me ask you guys this. Let me jump in real quick. If Morata put in the shifts that we see from Giroud, where he's holding up play or he's making assists, would that still change your opinion about what he's doing, or would the price tag still just demand, pure goals from him?
I mean, it would be. I would view it differently. I think. I think what I love from, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, the things that we love about Giroud are some of the things that we don't like about Morata. He stays up. He has a positive attitude. He wins headers. He generally interchanges well with Hazard. He's put in less goals over just slightly less amount of time than Morata has. But I think every fan at Chelsea views him a little bit differently because he kind of has a go-get-him attitude. Whereas Alvaro clearly went through some things last year that were really difficult for him, not only learning the league, but but some of the attitude stuff too. And to be honest, the expectations for Giroud are less because his price tag was 12 million or something like that. And Morata's was 57 to 75, whatever, the add-on clauses and everything ended up, being. So with the level, Dan, of acquisition, I think you made a really fair point, which is you would expect, 3-4 times the amount of production out of someone who's younger, faster, should be more clinical than Olivier Giroud. But I think, the fans are have an endearing feeling towards Giroud right now.
And I think the challenge is when you look at, what Liverpool have in terms of, Firmino, Salah, Mane. When you look at City with Aguero, Jesus. When you look at, Tottenham with, Harry Kane. When you look at Arsenal with Aubameyang and Lacazette. And you look at United, with Lukaku occasionally. We definitely do not have these, like, out of Eden Hazard, like the quality of our attack is not as strong as, our primary competition in the Premier League. And so there will have to be some 1-0, 2-0 victories, that are a little tense, a little tighter, that we were going to have to work harder for than potentially some of these sides, that if they concede a goal, it's very easy for them to go back and win a game 4-1, 5-1 on the back of it. So, I think from a Morata standpoint, if you were adding kind of those assist elements, yes, I would feel better about the situation. But I think you want someone who's leading our line who can attribute some level of goals in the 20-plus range. Like, that has to be part and parcel of what they do. And as much as I would say, like, it'd be great, if Eden Hazard is now doing 20-30, then you potentially have a striker who's doing a little less. But, ultimately, Liverpool last season, what was it? I think, there's somewhere between 40 to 50 goals across their front three. Like, if Eden is doing 20 to 30, then, you would hope that between the other two players that they could chip in, that additional 20. But I don't even know with where they're at right now if Giroud or Morata would be able to kind of combine, hit a total of 25 this season. In the Premier League specifically. So, and that's scary from a prospect of just being a competitive side with an attack that makes you frightened. Because if you're not frightened about Morata, you can let him kind of hang around a little bit and go double or triple team Eden the way you want and force him out of the game and make it difficult and put us into very compromising positions. So, I think there's plenty to kind of think about there when it comes to what our attack is valued at. I mean, I don't know if you have a feeling on that, Mike, as you pose the question to kind of wrap on it.
I agree. You guys or clubs have players that are loved because of effort, and Giroud is definitely an effort player, and we see things happen because of that effort. I do think we had to take a dose of reality today, in which we really still are that 10th place team from last year. We've had some improvements and we've had some luck, but kind of from that attacking perspective, you can see why we finished where we did last season, and not 10th place, but sorry, 5th place, but where, just the difference between where we finish and where those other top clubs are with that offense. So overall, yeah, I mean, we need more, but again, what do you do when you've spent 70 million on a player and they're not performing? And how do you make that work? How do you rectify selling and not giving him all the chances in the world without, at the detriment of the club?
Yeah, I think it's a good conversation. One point that Shane brought up, he was asking, is with this lineup that we had, it goes as Air Muggle on Instagram, asking if we think that Sarri missed any opportunities with selection subs, or do you think the players just couldn't get the better of a resolute West Ham today? Nick, do you think there was any lineup changes you might have made differently heading into this match?
I'm not going to tell the man how to do his job, but I think when you're playing 2 matches a week, you have to utilize your depth. It was clear that Willian was gassed from the very beginning. So, if Pedro's out and Willian's gassed and, Hazard's not having a banner day, who do you turn to? And I think that, a really fun, easy suggestion would be Callum Hudson-Odoi, not knowing, kind of how he's doing in training or how Sarri rates him. I would have loved to see him just be fearless and take on Zabaleta and or Declan Rice today, because I think he would have had a field day because they're both kind of slow. And look, I think from a striking situation, it was pretty clear that neither Giroud or Morata was going to have a day. So I don't really know what you do there unless you want to play Eden as a striker. So yeah, I don't know a ton. I think Mike might have been the other shout, as someone who clearly looked hungry when he came on.
Yeah, that would have been my pick, but then it puts you in the position in which who then fills in for Kovacic if he comes out. Where's the depth there? Because that's your midfield depth. Because of once again, RLC's not on the bench. I have to agree that I think when you looked at that starting 11, it was probably their strongest team, with the Pedro injury. And for me, the issue that I have is that most likely with muscular injuries, like what we saw with Rudiger, that's probably because he played, on Thursday. And I would have liked to see him get a break in, this past match. And I part of me feels like that might have attributed to the injury that he sustained, and potentially what's going to happen with him out of the lineup for maybe a match or two. Dan?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to consider there. And I definitely think that I was actually a little shocked. I mean, I think ultimately Rudiger came off because of injury, but I think we would have seen Victor Moses come on at some point to try to freshen the attack and maybe replace Willian at a point in the match when he was starting to look very leggy. But that's probably the only thing that off the top, maybe either that or trying to throw Zappacosta on for Azpilicueta to try to kind of move the ball up, especially with the space that Willian was finding, to add just a little bit more pace would have been an interesting kind of flexibility point there to try to test. Because ultimately, we've got a couple questions about the how are we going to kind of break down back tens and 10 behind the ball. It's a little difficult, but ultimately, pace, quick passing and movement it is going to be part of that. And we just didn't have some of that today. We took too long to get off the ball and to move it forward. So again, it's great to have 70+% possession. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to win the game. It should, hopefully, but it doesn't always. So one thing kind of on that point, though, Byron __ James on Twitter was asking, is Sarri going to learn a lesson about rotation after this match? A lot of players look sluggish and off pace. So, if we're going to predict as we head into this 2-match stretch here against Liverpool, probably playing an A team and a B team, Nick, how much rotation do you think we'll see across the course of these 2 games? And do you think there are players who will be asked to play all 180 minutes of those 2 matches?
Yeah, I think Jorginho will be asked to play all 180 minutes. I think that, for those doubting N'Golo Kanté, I think he might be asked to do the same. I think Kovacic is probably the guy who can, given the injury he suffered against Cardiff, probably doesn't play on Wednesday, but would definitely then play against Liverpool. We're not going to see Eden Hazard against Liverpool midweek, most likely. So let's hope that HudsonOdoi can take care of business there. And then, you're probably going to see Dave, I would say, is your, maybe Zappacosta comes in for him on Wednesday, but it just seems to me like Dave would have a really good shot at playing both just for backline stability if Rudiger couldn't play. So lots of different variances there, Mike, but what are your thoughts?
In his press conference, Sarri said that, maybe he makes 11 changes, but most likely probably 5. I think that's probably much closer to the truth. I expect to see him play the players he trusts, and unfortunately, I think somebody like Moses just hasn't gained his trust, or maybe he's just, there isn't that position that he sees him in. He's not the midfielder, not the right back, and not maybe the wing that's needed. I expect for Sarri to kind of do whatever he wants, and I think he's going to identify the match on Wednesday as a very, very important match. I think he will go very, very hard. I could very well see Eden playing, and I kind of expect a similar lineup to what we saw in the Europa League. And I hope we're not in a similar situation of last season in which, the manager's making a very clear statement by not playing specific players because he doesn't feel they're good enough to try and pressure the club come, the winter transfer window. But he definitely has his small squad of people, and I would really like to see some rotation, especially when it comes to Ampadu and HudsonOdoi.
Yeah, I don't think that narrative really holds. I think you can ascribe it, and again, we're not in the back room, we're not in the boardroom, we're not in the dressing room, and we can only hear the after action and try to read between the lines of what players say about what they do with emojis and photos to try to understand what the situation really was over the last 2 years. But, even at Napoli, Sarri does not rotate a ton, right? And Napoli didn't have the same level of resources and depth of players. And, we might disagree, with the club on the valuation of bringing in someone like Daniel Drinkwater to, be a Chelsea player, which will continue to mystify me to the end of time. But, I don't think he's actively choosing to not play players. I think he's just, there's a trust element, right? And maybe he doesn't, have necessarily a trust with certain players yet. Again, he came in super late, short preseason. You kind of have to, kind of go with some of the players that you have. And I think this might be one of the first or second opportunities after the Europa League matches where he can start to play a few of these players in. Ampadu just got his, 5-year, deal here just last week. I think we will see, hopefully, Ampadu for some amount of time in these 2 games here. I think that would be really great. As Nick said, I think Callum HudsonOdoi getting an opportunity, especially with how sharp he looked in preseason. Again, that's not an indication of how you're going to play all the time, but given an opportunity, I think that would be phenomenal as well. So, yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think about what's going to happen when it comes to rotation over this week. Is there one player you think who's going to get an opportunity to shine? When Brandon's on the show, we don't spend time talking about the January transfer window, but we have mentioned it a lot when he's been away. So we will entertain a question from our friend Matt, 1689 Jedi, asking, we need another attacking threat. Who would you want to see sign? I have my thoughts on a sleeper I plan to write up very soon. So he's teasing a little bit of action on his new blog that he started. But, Mike, is there a player? Let's play the realistic signing game. Is there a player you think we could sign in January that, if they were added to the squad, would allow us to kind of unlock a higher level?
Well, it's not really a lot of fun if we're going to be realistic, right? But I would love to see like a Leon Bailey. Some of the wingers that I wanted to see this summer have seemed to have signed long-term contracts, kind of making it seemingly impossible. And we're not going to pay, $70 million for a Zaha. I would like to see a larger, a more physical and pacier winger in the winter. I'd love to see somebody who's going to be able to threaten teams, physically and with pace. That's, I think, what we're missing.
If you watched Lyon beat Man City on Wednesday, I think, of last week, Fekir looked outrageous. I didn't know a ton about him, admittedly, until Joe Tweeds came on our show and started waxing poetic about him a couple years ago over the summer. So that's one that would be great. I would also like to see Mishi come back from loan. I don't know why he's on loan in the first place, to be completely honest with you. But if our strikers continue, both of our strikers continue to not score, we gotta bring him back and see if he can do it. So those would be a couple that I would look at. I mean, I think Mike's shot with Bailey is fantastic. He is a player that I would covet for sure. But yeah, I think bring old Mishi back, huh? Why not?
Yeah, I think another one that there's been very tenuous links at some point is like Lucas Paqueta, who is a Brazilian player, and he's kind of a goal scoring winger. That would be another kind of potential, more off the radar acquisitions. I mean, there's definitely players that we're going to continue to get linked with. I think you're going to see Lewandowski links all the time because it's just FIFA. A fun story to write, and people like kind of making crazy assumptions of what could happen. Beyond that, I genuinely don't know if the type of player you're going to want to acquire, like a Bailey, I don't know if you're going to get them in January. I think you're going to look to see them in summer, Nick. And I think that's going to be the harder thing is nobody's trying halfway through their season to sell players that might be integral to them staying up or challenging for European spots or while they have European competition still going on.
You are correct, Dan. That's why I'm bringing Mishi back.
You and JT, huh?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that is another wonderful question. Beyond that, we will take a kind of short break here to make a little connection, a little love connection with our friends at World Soccer Shop here. Nicholas, I know you wanted to mention that.
Oh, it's spicier than I thought this lead-in was going to be. So, thank you, Dan. Yes, our friends at World Soccer Shop have continued to grant us our promo code. So, if you're looking to buy one of the new kits, maybe the new weird kind of blue one that recently came out, or the exquisite yellow kit that was worn today as Chelsea played West Ham, then we would encourage you to do that at World Soccer Shop. Use the code LondonPod for 10% off. We are also going to have a kit unboxing video coming soon from our boy Brandon, who is obviously not on this show, but has been doing some hard work in the background to get our new kit unboxing video up. So head over to YouTube when that is ready. But in the meantime, go to worldsoccershop.com, use the code LondonPod. Thank us later. The end.
Yeah, as a owner of the away kit for this season, it is mighty sharp, Nick, and definitely worth an acquisition. Might be the best Nike kit that we've had so far.
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment, Dan.
Well, yeah, that's all I want is you to agree with me. But maybe we will do that as we kind of look ahead to the fact that we will be playing Liverpool this Wednesday. So the day after you hopefully listen to this pod, or potentially if you're a time traveler at some point in a undetermined time spectrum in the future, alternate timelines maybe. In the Carabao Cup, it is at Anfield. They have just won against Southampton 3-0 in their previous match, so they had plenty of fun with them. Hopefully we'll see something similar when we get to watch Chelsea play Southampton in December, or in January of the new year. So initial thoughts and feelings, Mike. How confident are you as we head into this League Cup game? Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling somewhere in between?
I don't feel too bad. This morning was a little rough, a little deflating, a bit like a Patriots football.
Wow.
Wow. Nice. I approve of that. Nice.
Yeah, but here's the deal. We finally look at all the matches in which we dug out a goal towards the end. Mr. Alonso himself, Mr. 80th minute. We found some magic. We didn't find the magic today. All right, we're on the road. Tough place to play. Big derby match. It is what it is. Derby, whatever. But for me, I'm not worried about Wednesday. I'm really worried about the weekend. But I think Sarri is very, very shrewd, and I think he understands the importance for us to be in all cup competitions. And as much as I would love to be at the top of the table right now, or be at 6 wins, we're going to drop. We're going to drop some points. We're going to lose the game eventually. And if we're going to lose, I would much rather have it be. I'd much rather have it be in the Premier League than and knock Liverpool out of the Carabao Cup. I know that sounds a little crazy and a little dumb, but that's my personal opinion. I think that as long as the more cup competitions we have, the more chances we get to see Sarri develop some of the younger players, hopefully. Because we'll see what he does, or just more chances for us to watch the same 11 play. But yeah, I'm not worried about Wednesday. Nick, where are you standing at that?
So I guess I kind of see your point. I think the Carabao Cup could provide Callum Hudson-Odoi, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Ethan Ampadu, kind of the three youth players that really have a chance in the squad. Certain chance to play, that would be ideal. But I would much rather win on Saturday than on Wednesday, if I'm being completely honest. I think the Premier League is going to be. It needs to stay close for as long as possible to give ourselves the best chance to be top four. And if this team is serious about competing for the title, then you have to beat Liverpool at home. I mean, that's just kind of a result that would certainly matter later in the year. So I would much rather win on Saturday. I would love to see the youth play. I would love to, hopefully we roll into Anfield with the best youth setup in England doing its job and taking care of business with some experience mixed in. But, Dan, I have to win on Saturday if I have to choose one of those two.
It's really interesting, and I think as we think about it, and make horrible mentions about railroad jobs by Roger Goodell and the league against the premier NFL franchise, the New England Patriots. I think about the fact that you sometimes have seen in the NFL season when teams have to play against each other multiple times, or know they might face off again in the playoffs. Is at least with the Patriots, sometimes you'll get a very vanilla game plan from Bill Belichick in a game that is very basic, that isn't meant to show your hand or tip your cards, and then you really get to see what they were intending to do when the game actually matters, quote unquote. And so I wonder how much of the game plan for Saturday will be evident, or for the weekend will be evident in what we see on Wednesday. And will there be a little bit more of a generic, less stylish execution on in the League Cup before we kind of maybe pull some surprises out of our hat for the Premier League match. I think I would rather win both. I think all of us would rather win both. I don't necessarily know if I am valuing one more than the other, but damn, I would not want Liverpool to win the Premier League. Like, I just don't. Like, they win the League Cup, it's whatever. I'm not, like, super, I'm miffed about it. But if they won the Premier League, man, like, that'd be awful. Like, can we just imagine, like, how mouthy and overconfident they would be? Like, come on. Yeah. Like, nobody wants that. That's going to be absolutely terrible. Like, we talked about Darkest Timeline last year. Man, just, like, throw oil on that and just, like, light it ablaze, because that's how bad that Darkest Timeline is going to get. Beat them on the weekend. I will gladly give up a cup competition for smacking Liverpool around, and kind of breaking this perfect record they have for the start of the season. It's the first time ever, I think, in the Premier League where Liverpool have won their first 6 games, and I would be happy to ensure that it was not 7 in a row.
And I agree with you there. But I think we have to ask ourselves a question of, are we being honest? Of course, I want to win both matches. Or are we being realistic? And I think from a realistic point of view, from where we are and the depth that we have and how we're playing, as opposed to where Liverpool is at this point, I don't think it's realistic to say, we're going to win both matches. I think we're going to be lucky to walk away with a win of the 2 matches, because they're playing that well, and I think they're playing some of their strengths are in areas that we have some weaknesses, especially with a potential injury to our best center back. So do I want to I think I'm just looking at it more of, I hope we can walk away with one of 2, because I think that's going to be a whole lot easier to swallow than some potentially 2 ugly losses in a row to Liverpool in a span of 4 days. That's where I'm standing, Nick. I'm kind of curious. Like, again, like, I know we want to win them all, but do you honestly think that we have a chance on Saturday?
If it were at Anfield, I would say no. I mean, it's at the Bridge, so there's always a chance. The thing that I brought up earlier in the year, and it'll be my final point on this. The thing I brought up earlier in the year is last year when we were playing under a more defensive style, and Antonio Kanté had a pretty well drilled system defensively. We played foil to Liverpool, and to some extent Man City, but even though they dominated us both times, we really frustrated Liverpool playing them. And I think the scenario that kind of comes up in my head is, are we Liverpool light right now? And if so, that doesn't look real good for me. So. If we had a different style to them, I'd give us a little bit of a better chance. But it'll be really interesting. The whole game on Saturday will come down to the midfield. Because I think in previous years when we played Liverpool, Mo Salah becomes pretty useless up front if he never gets the ball, or Antonio Rudiger is just putting him in his pocket all day. So I think there's just a lot that will go into it. But if our midfield plays well, of course we have a chance.
All right, well, we want to hear what you think. How is it going to go? How is the Liverpool double match up against the wonderful and terrible Reds? Wonderful in their form, terrible because of who they are. Going to play out over the next week. So tweet at us, message us on Instagram, shoot us emails, send us postcards, maybe. But yeah, we are going to wrap this up, and we are going to thank you for spending a couple hours of your week with us. But until next time, after Chelsea have beaten Liverpool twice, you know what to do, everybody. Keep the blue flag flying high.